Hello listeners and welcome to today's episode of Cult News. I'm your speaker Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast, and for this segment I will be bringing you recent information on the subject of coercive control. Coercive control refers to a pattern of behaviour by an abuser to control and dominate their victim or victims through a range of tactics such as isolation, manipulation, intimidation, and physical and emotional abuse. It is a form of domestic abuse that can be difficult to identify as it often occurs over an extended period and can involve subtle or insidious tactics. In the UK, the criminalisation of coercive control is a relatively recent development. Prior to 2015, there were no specific legal provisions for prosecuting this type of behaviour, and victims often struggled to get the support and protection they needed. However, in 2015, the Serious Crime Act was introduced, which made coercive control a criminal offence. The Act defined coercive control as behaviour that has a serious effect on a person and which is designed to make them subordinate and/or dependent by isolating them from sources of support, exploiting their resources and capacities for personal gain, depriving them of the means needed for independence, resistance or escape, and regulating their everyday behaviour. Since the introduction of the legislation, there has been a significant increase in the number of prosecutions for coercive control. In 2019, the Crown Prosecution Service reported that the number of convictions for coercive control had risen by 60% in just 1 year. Despite this progress, there is still much work to be done to raise awareness of coercive control and to ensure that victims receive the support and protection they need. It is a complex and insidious form of abuse that can have devastating long-term effects on its victims, and it is essential that it is taken seriously by law enforcement and society as a whole. Recently, the Family Survival Trust published an extensive report into coercive control in cultic groups in the UK, finding that many insidious groups exist that use the overwhelming tactics of coercive control, and yet, as it stands, cannot be charged with criminal acts, as the UK criminal law only recognises intimate partnerships and family environments within this Serious Crime Act. It is the hope of the Family Survival Trust and for most of us listening, I imagine, that the Act will be changed to include groups at some stage. The Family Survival Trust is a UK-based charity helping cult survivors recover, with help from leading cult expert Alexandra Stain. Stain mentioned in an interview with me, which you can find now on the podcast, that one way we can become involved in this issue is to approach local MPs and councillors to discuss coercive control and the need for further criminal laws and protections that will lead to prevention. The Guardian released an article recently on how the Crown Prosecution Service will now guide people on the tactic of love bombing in domestic abuse cases, but of course this also needs to be extended into group environments, as it has been identified as a powerful recruitment and retainment tactic used almost universally across destructive cults. With The Guardian also releasing an article detailing an upcoming Channel 4 documentary that looks into the case of Angel Lynn, a young woman who was seriously injured when falling from a van, escaping her own kidnapping by her abusive ex-partner. The article details what we can learn about coercive control from this documentary. The Daily Mail has released a piece detailing that a theatre has put a coercive control trigger on the play that inspired musical romance My Fair Lady, detailing that George Bernard Shaw's hit play Pygmalion sees Cockney flower seller Eliza Doolittle turned into a society lady by Professor Henry Higgins. The subject of coercive control is gaining much needed attention, but there is still a long way to go. To find out more about your local Member of Parliament, where you can set up meetings with MPs to discuss concerns you have with your community, you can visit the government website and provide your postcode, which will give you a list of local options. That is the end of today's Cult News. Join me tomorrow for more. I'm your speaker, Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast.